Une version traduite en français est en ligne. Remontez votre flux et cherchez le petit drapeau français. Elle est en place. C'est la poudre.
Tiens, on a découpé une femme en morceaux rue de la bienséance à 2 pas du château. Tiens, on a découpé une femme.
I am a feminist.
Je vous obsède avec une constance.
Je ne me suis pas conduit d'une façon conforme à ce qu'on attend d'une jeune fille d'abord et d'une femme ensuite.
I'm sorry that I didn't become the world's first black classic pianist.
C'est enfermant pour tout le monde.
Le droit de se regarder en face, le droit de se ramasser la gueule.
Je crois qu'une femme qui existe dans son temps, à l'intérieur de son temps, n'a pas de quoi qu'elle marque son époque.
Entre subjectivité et révolution. Boum.
Poudre. I am Lauren Bastide, and today my guests are Loretta Ross and Natalie Wynn.
Calm policing is what others tell you to do. Staying calm is what you tell yourself.
Now, to be honest, on Twitter, I'm probably not going to spend a whole lot of time responding to some individual person and trying to educate them because I have better things to do with my life.
This episode was recorded on Zoom, thanks to Les Créatives Festival in November 2020. And I'm very proud to be able to share it with you today. It was an incredible pleasure and honor to be able to talk to these two major activists. And also, it felt good to take an hour to explore this complex and fascinating online phenomenon we sometimes call cancel culture. With Loretta Ross and Natalie Wynn, we talked about calling in, calling out, and self-care. Good evening or morning to you, according to where on the planet you're watching us. My name is Lauren Bastide. I'm a journalist, author, and feminist activist from France. And it is my great honor to be hosting this conversation tonight with two women I truly admire. Loretta Ross, you're a women's rights activist fighting for reproductive justice for over 50 years. It's such an honor to talk to you because you are a living legend. Your accomplishments are impossible to enumerate, but you were one of the voices of women of color at 1977 Women Conference. You created the National Center for Human Rights Education and the sister song Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective in the 90s. And you became one of the world's most renowned experts on abortion for Black women, as well as an advocate for rape survivors. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on your show.
Natalie Wynn, you're a philosopher and a YouTuber. Your channel, ContraPoints, which I have been following for a while, like 1 million other people, is an extremely useful place to get information about politics in the US. You use your unique sense of rhetoric and amazing makeup skills to fight against, fascism. Your work is remarkably beautiful and relevant. I might have commented a few of your social media posts by a single I love you, because I do. I'm really a fan. Welcome, Natalie.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, and hello, everyone.
So there would be tons of conversations to have about both your personal path and activist achievements, but you're here with us tonight because you have also become experts on this quote-unquote cancel culture or call-out culture. You both brought extremely measured and clever insights on this incredibly tricky subject. Professor Loretta Ross, you give a class at Smith College about it. This class has just been featured in the New York Times in an article by Jessica Bennett. Natalie, you created this incredible video about cancel culture that became one of the most viewed and famous video of your already very successful channel. Okay, so now let's get started. I'm going to be stepping right into it with my first question. Some people, especially left-wing activists, say there is no such thing as cancel culture, that this word was invented by conservatives to diminish the attempts of progressive people to hold them accountable for their oppressive behavior. Are these people wrong?
I think they're both wrong and they're right. It's a very complicated question. I believe that the original cancel culture or call-out culture was started by the Puritans when they had the witch hunts or the call-outs when duels were taking place and people were being shot. I mean, that's the original definition of calling out. And so certainly it's a long-standing strain in human behavior to be judgmental about people and to give public shaming to that judgment. So that's not new. What is new, in my opinion, is social media and how quickly and fast it can travel. And one of the things that I pay attention to is how the right is suddenly criticizing their own behaviors because they're the architects of call out culture, when people on the left are using it to call them out and to punch them up and punch up on them, because it's really about the democratizing of the internet and the information and being able to use it to expose behaviors that they successfully kept hidden before. And so they're right and wrong. It's not new. It is a legitimate tool for us to use to address abuses of power. At the same time, we overuse it when we're just talking about people never being forgiven for a mistake they made a long time ago.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think you have to be specific about what you're talking about when you talk about cancel culture, because one of the problems with that term is it's so general. Is it about public shaming in general? Because if that's what we mean when we say cancel culture, then this has nothing to do with the left at all. This is just, I mean, a long-standing like historical thing. Like, many countries, many cultures have used public shaming as punishment. On the internet, this has been like widely discussed in the forms of, women being shamed for posting nudes, or like, I don't know. There's a whole book about this by John Ronson called "So You've Been Publicly Shamed," which is about someone. There's like a right-wing example where some woman posted like a disrespectful photo in Arlington Cemetery, the U.S. military cemetery, and like people basically tried to end her career in life. So I think that when I made my video about canceling, what I was more talking about is canceling as a kind of shunning, or as a kind of sort of exile from a certain community, and especially communities of activists. So I think of it as a kind of like within leftist thing where it's what was described by Joe Freeman in this I think 1976 Ms. Magazine essay called "Trashing," which is about basically her experiences being sort of exiled from within the women's movement and being sort of lied about and have rumors spread and having. So I think that you have to, when I talk about cancel culture, I'm talking specifically about this kind of shaming and exclusion that we do as a sort of form of punishment for people within these sort of activist communities. And I think that's undeniably real. Yeah.
Would you agree to say that actually cancel culture fails to cancel people who are really powerful? I mean, to link to something that's happening in France right now, the TV channels are full of old cis white males crying about having been canceled, whereas they're still selling thousands of books and they're still all over television crying, and we only hear them. So isn't this the failure? Like, people who are really in situation of power, they don't get canceled.
Well, yeah, it reminds me of people complaining about political correctness, right? Free speech is over, they say on national television. I can't say anything anymore, right? I think that, that's one thing I sort of don't like about the phrase cancel culture, is that people hear canceling and you think like, oh, cancel, like a TV show would be canceled, as if you're being silenced, when honestly, yeah, a lot of times this doesn't really work. I guess a lot of people point to like J.K. Rowling as an example. Her career is not really affected by this in any way, although I don't know, I can't speak to the personal effect it may have had on her, but I think that there are cases where someone's career has been more or less ended. I haven't heard from the American comedian Louis C.K. in a while, so sometimes it works, but a lot of the time, yeah, it is. There's another real phenomenon where people who are just complaining about being criticized, or people complaining about like the fact that people are mad at them for the things they've said, they say, "Oh, I'm being canceled." Well, I'm sorry that's just how social media works. If you say something unpopular or controversial, there's going to be a lot of kickback.
I think the people with privilege and power who are complaining about the cancel culture simply want what they've had in the past, and that's the ability to use their overlarge podiums and voices to have free speech without consequences. And unfortunately, there's a critic at every keyboard now who can reach millions of people in a very short while with only 140 characters. And that scares them to death because they're not used to getting a pushback and be made to feel responsible for their words. And so those are not the ones that I really worry about, because you're right. Even if they're quote canceled, actually infamy still monetizes them. They still can make money. I worry more about how we use it horizontally against people of equal power, or when we punch down, when we go after people with less power and privilege, which I think is an immoral use of our ability to be judgmental. But I'm not that worried about the pampered privileged people who have their prejudices. I'm just not worried about them because I actually have a different strategy for them than trying to create a bridge or a calling in process for them. For them, I think calling out is totally appropriate.
So when you say you worry about this horizontal canceling, what do you worry about? What worries you most?
It worries me when you have a good friendship for 20 years and then you find out that they did something unbelievably stupid when they were young, like using the N word or dressing in an Indian costume for Halloween and that kind of thing. First of all, it worries me because you don't appreciate that people grow and change. And so you use that snapshot of them from a previous time in their life as if that describes their whole character and being and has a statement on where they are now. And that's simply not true. That's a very poor threat assessment. It's too simplistic an analysis. And we shouldn't reduce people to cardboard caricatures based on our interpretation of that snapshot of their life. It's an unfolding life. It's not just a snapshot. And I critique that practice. Or when people, even in today's conversation, are trying to give voice to what we call the unfolding thought, an incomplete thought that you don't have the exact right words for yet, but you're being honest and you're trying to say, I thought we could use the word retarded. I didn't know that that was a bad word now, because for all the years I've heard about it, we said retarded. Well, you can either jump down their throats and say, oh, you should never say that word, or you can just offer them love and compassion and say, well, we used to use that word. Now people who are disabled that way, they like us to use this word. And I remember when I used to use the word. You have choices, not to let people escape harm, but you can make an intentional choice not to blow up their lives because of your perception of their harm.
Mm-hmm. You just used the word simplification, and it reminds me of something you say in your video, Natalie, about essentializing the people and turning very complex situation in one sentence that doesn't sum it up, but just like mess it up. And I kind of read it as a subculture of this post-truth reality we're living in. Like, if you see what I mean, like there is no longer such thing as truth. Anything that's written on the internet becomes some sort of truth.
Oh, I definitely think the internet makes this worse too, because with social media, you sort of never can escape the past. Everything that you post becomes part of this eternal present. And if someone can view your old tweets just as readily as your new tweets, you can take a screenshot of something you posted 5 years ago and post it again. So I find that anyone who's like a semi-public figure online, there's people who kind of like, they sort of collate your list of crimes, like all the bad things that you ever posted. And then they use this to create this kind of vilifying collage of your worst moments, and then that's kind of used as evidence so that you are a bad person. So that's like the essentializing thing, right? It's not just, oh, this person posted a dumb tweet, on, July 7th, 2016. It's like, this person is a racist, a transphobe, a misogynist, right? And it's like, that is like a sort of total judgment of a person and not a kind of more measured like response to this one moment, I guess.
I think the thing that most frustrates me is that there's no allowance for difference of opinions. Any pluralistic society is supposed to have honest debate. But when you push the practice as a group think that we all must think exactly alike or I'm going to punish you, you're not creating a civil society, you're creating a cult.
Yeah, that's a frustration I have, is that there's no space made to be in disagreement, in conflict, without being enemies. And that's right, like the dualism of this. Either you're good or you're evil. And everyone's looking for signs to see whether you are a good, okay person or whether you're a bad person based on your posts, for example, your tweets, right? And yeah, if it's like there's no subtlety, like no middle ground between like, oh, this is like not a great opinion, or like this is not very informed, or like this could have been worded better because it kind of sounds like you're saying something that this is bad. Instead, it's just taken as like evidence of your allegiance with the forces of evil, right? Like, it's true, it is kind of have this, I guess, sort of chilling effect on discussion, where you feel like you cannot even have like a partial disagreement without sort of becoming, I mean, I find this with colleagues, like we cannot disagree in public or people will decide that we're enemies. Like, why can't you be in conflict without being enemies? Like, friends are in conflict all the time. I don't know. It's frustrating.
Do you think it's relevant to stress the fact that it's not a coincidence that this practical of cancel culture appeared during the Trump era, during which opinions and people got extremely polarized? Does it make sense to you?
Well, I think it's part of it. Like, I think that um, I think there's almost a kind of like trauma of seeing, because the sort of political duality in the United States has gotten, or has been revealed as maybe so extreme. Like, there's a tendency to, we've sort of like lost the ability to view to view disagreement as like a thing that can sort of be worked out, or it can be treated as like that we don't have any procedure in place for like peacemaking or for conflict resolution, right? The only sort of practice we have is responding like, oh, you're one of the bad guys, like, we get you. Like, everyone is a victim or an abuser in a sense, right? There's no sense that you can be and I think that comes from, having a president who is an abuser, and having, an extremely far right, like, party, is that it's, I don't know, we feel like we're at war, I guess.
Well, this question has particular import for me because I teach about fascism in my class, and what we're dealing with is a particularly Americanized form of fascism that doesn't precisely look like what happened in Germany and Italy, or even what's happening in Hungary or Turkey or other countries. But guys, our fascism doesn't have a swastika, it has a cross and an American flag and the Bible. So people are reluctant to even use the F word to describe it. Trump did not create this neo-fascist movement in our society. He was elected because there is a neo-fascist movement in our society. He's not smart enough to have created it. He's not even smart enough to do it well. I mean, he's not that person. But at the same time, these things are in America's DNA. I actually describe it as the unfinished Civil War. We had a Civil War 150 years ago, trying to decide the question of whether or not we were going to be a free and inclusive democracy, or are we going to be a republic in which only a small set of people had privilege, power, and money. And we've never actually decided that question. So we're citizens of a country that has yet to land on what it wants to be. We're not there yet. And so Trump is the outcome of a backlash against a Black president, Barack Obama, who was leading us towards that inclusive, democratic, pluralistic society. And then half of our country decided that they did not like that future. They actually want to go backwards into the 19th century. That's what Make America Great Again means, make America the 19th century again in what we read. And they're frightened by not only the changes that they see, but that they anticipate. Because in 30 years, our country will not be a majority white country, simply because of demographics. And so they're so harsh on immigration. They're trying to manipulate white women's fertility with the restrictions on birth control and abortion. They're trying to just write trans and gay people out of human society. I mean, they're acting like panicked people because they are demographically doomed. And the sad part is that the majority of the people who should be on our side, who we should call liberals, are afraid to use the F word. And if you misdiagnose fascism, then you're going to be ill prepared to adequately fight it.
Thank you so much for this analysis. It made me think when I was listening to you that you don't destroy the master's house with the master's tool, to quote Audre Lorde. And I think it's what you mean when you talk about calling in rather than calling out. Could you explain this idea of calling in you try to promote?
Well, I was happy to see that young people had created the concept of calling in as early as the Occupy movement in 2011, and in 2015, this young Vietnamese American writer had talked about calling in, and that was about the same time I heard the term. So I don't know if I can't be credited with coining it, but for me, calling in is a call out done with love. That's the simplest explanation. And that means you're not ignoring the harm, but you're also not overstating it, exaggerating it, or overreacting to it. Because if someone misgenders somebody, you can just respond with love and say, I prefer, this or that, instead of, you're misgendering me and you just re-raped me all over again because nobody will accept my identity. I mean, those are choices you get to make. And the best example I have is from a student in my class who I accidentally misgendered. And he told me quite calmly, because I was expecting to be like blasted out, because you work so hard on getting this right. And he said, "Oh, that's all right, Professor Ross. I misgender myself sometimes. We're all learning." And I thought that was the most exquisite grace. Now, of course, I need to work on doing it better. That's not an excuse for me to continue to do it, because it's a skill that we're all trying to learn. But it was also from an 18-year-old showing us how to be in good and honest relationship with each other without the assumption that we mean to cause harm to each other simply because we make mistakes.
Yeah, I agree that there's such a communication problem that some people have where, I don't know, it seems like what they want to do is to express that they're hurt, right? Okay, I understand that, sometimes people say hurtful things and you're entitled to express that, but it's also worth thinking about what's the effect of your expression, right? Who's going to hear what you're saying and how are they going to respond? And people who are feeling attacked will defend themselves, right? So I think that even without it, just even without saying an ethical discussion of, oh, it makes you a better person if you respond with love, it also makes you more likely to be listened to if you respond with love, right? Because that way people don't shut down in the way that people shut down if they feel you're saying, oh, you're a terrible person. If you're hearing, oh, someone's calling me a terrible person, your ego defends itself, right? It says, no, you're crazy, right? These crazy social justice warriors are attacking me and political correctness has gone too far. And that's what's going on here, right? And I'm fine. So I don't know. I've met very few people in my life who are capable of being attacked in that way and responding calmly. Most people, it's just the fact of the matter, it's just human psychology. Most people, when attacked, will defend. So you have to find a way to call people, if we could say use the word call people in a way that doesn't make them feel like you are attacking them. I mean, and some people, it's true, they won't listen. And, those people, there's not much you can do with them. But I think a lot of people will listen if you're able to kind of reach out in a more human way that's not like just attempting to sort of vilify them or attempting to shame them even.
It's also about like DMing instead of publicly shaming, right?
I want to say there is a legitimate critique, though, to the calling in process. And that is, it presumes that you're willing to do the emotional labor of investing in someone else's growth. So it should always be voluntary. It should never be obligatory, because that means you're taking time out of your very busy day to help somebody else grow. And so you're very free to walk away and say, I ain't got time for this. Grow up, get up, whatever. So I don't want to act like it's a routine that everybody must take on. Nah, it's a choice too. Sometimes you're in a sufficiently healed space where you're willing to help someone else grow. Not maybe so they won't harm you, but so they won't harm somebody else the same way in the future. But sometimes you just want to say, talk to the hand. I ain't ready to have that conversation with you. And I love the way Sonia Renee Taylor has an approach on it. She said, I don't believe necessarily in calling in. I believe in calling on people to be better human beings. And that way I don't have to invest in their emotional growth or maturity, but I can certainly tell them what my expectations of them are.
Yeah, I agree that it is work, and no, it shouldn't be the thing that you're obligated to do under any situation, because like I said, it is it's much easier to express how you feel and not to go about to thinking oh, how am I going to work on this person? You have to choose carefully when you do that, because 9 times out of 10 that is a waste of your time. And I think that, the way I sort of have chosen to manage it in my own life is I make these videos where I can sort of, I'm not reacting in any way, right? I've taken weeks usually to think about exactly what I want to say and how I want to say it. And I think that, I am also getting paid to do this, which I should be getting paid to do it because it's work, right? I think that, no, to be honest, on Twitter, I'm probably not going to spend a whole lot of time responding to some individual person and trying to educate them, because I have better things to do with my life. But yeah, there's moments I think when it can really be worth it to try. I don't know. I think that, I guess I don't know if I can come up with an example off the top of my head, but sometimes, I don't know, a public figure on Twitter, let's say a public figure on Twitter posts something mildly transphobic because they don't understand what they're talking about. That, I don't know. I think in that situation, my inclination is not to immediately jump down their throat because they're going to double down and do the whole thing. It's either not to respond at all, or if you're up to it, respond in a way that's sort of, to the average person, is going to look more inviting, I guess, than just but Twitter also doesn't encourage that, right? Because that's part of the problem too, is it actually drives attention, and it drives, it's a platform that rewards the snarky clap back, right? You quote tweet, you say the thing that makes them look bad, and then you're done and you get the retweets, and it's very tempting to just do that. But I don't know. I don't really see that as very helpful. It just kind of draws attention to yourself, really.
And there's a monetization about the social media too. Every time a negative comment or a conflict reaches 1 million users, the platform that has that comment on it made $400,000. So it's like we're the unpaid interns for the internet when we use it for the call-out culture, because we're not getting any part of that $400,000. Matter of fact, we're paying them to let us make them money. It's just is a very absurd relationship, and we can't get any control over the ownership of our labor if we continue to give it away for free to the Twitterverse.
Mm-hmm. So what happens when someone does that? When someone's make like a very witty joke to get some retweets and is actually shaming and making someone else feel very bad? Is it that this person forgot there is a human behind the account? Does it internet that enables us to disconnect from the fact that we're actually talking to people with feelings?
I do think people, I mean, I think it's easy not to think about it when you're online. Like I used to do this like when I was, a little earlier in my internet career, I guess, like back in, I don't know, I remember 2017, like I used to go on Twitter and I would like retweet someone's bad take and blast them basically for saying something wrong. Um, I guess I would learn to kind of feel bad about it though, because it never helped. And it often kind of just it just poured fuel on a fire. It ignited all this conflict and all this anger and all this negativity on both sides. And then I felt like, I don't know, I accomplished nothing except making a bunch of people angry. And I sort of learned to stop doing it because I just didn't feel good about it. Like I didn't feel good about doing that. So, I just kind of try to keep an eye on, I sort of develop, I guess, a sense of judgment about who is someone who is like worth maybe reaching out to and talking to, and who is someone who has just, been called in, been corrected, been reached out to 100 times for the last 4 years, and is simply never going to change. Because there's people like that too. Like they're not worth your time. And in that case, I just kind of block them because I don't know. I have better things to do with my life than get angry at people who are never going to change.
But part of it also is accepting that we have to deal with people as they are, not as we wish they were. And so you can spend a lot of time in life wasting your time trying to make people be who you think they should be, instead of accepting and dealing with them in the reality of who they are. And that doesn't mean that you don't have expectations of them, but at the same time, you don't have false expectations of them, that you actually see them. Usually they have that inner good person that they think they are, that doesn't necessarily match up with that outer bad behavior that they're doing. And the more then you can use a calling in strategy by emphasizing that inner good person instead of focusing on the outer bad person, the more likely you are to not only help them grow, but be around to witness it. But if you start by emphasizing the outer bad person, like Natalie said, they're just going to double down and walk away from you because they felt that you didn't see them, you didn't see their good side, and you didn't respect them. That combination means that they've shut their listening down to you anyway.
There is one danger when you try and tell people, be calm, be polite, act with love and kindness. There is tone policing. It's often something we ask women, people of color, or left-wing activists, like, be more polite, ask nicely. And it's not a good thing, right? Because our anger and the fact that we have emotions and express them, it's also what makes activism alive. So how do we I don't know, how do we answer to this danger of tone policing that might kill us politically?
Tone policing is what others tell you to do. Staying calm is what you tell yourself. There's a difference. And so there's a real use for righteous anger and outrage. I'm not saying that. Again, why should you let someone else's impressions of you, when they don't even know you, dictate your behavior? But your most important relationship is with your own integrity. How do you constantly maintain a good opinion of yourself? Requires work. And that requires making choices that make you feel good, not making choices that makes not only you feel yourself feel worse, but makes the world worse than it really needs to be.
Yeah, I think all this advice that we're talking about, calling in, not calling out, being, reaching out to someone's good side, like all this can kind of be misused by someone who wants to like lecture you about how you're behaving on, like, I don't know, sometimes you are righteously angry, or sometimes you are, on Twitter calling out someone who's like very, very deeply deserves it, and like being like, have you considered like maybe you should not be angry and then just calm down? Like that can be. I think that's kind of a misuse of the complaint about cancel culture, right? But I think that, yeah, it's not everyone. Not everyone's always going to be thinking like strategically, but like in the moments that you have where you do think like, why am I doing this? I think it's also like good for people to ask like, especially on the internet, like, why am I spending time on this? Why am I spending time on this app? Complaining about celebrities, like, what am I hoping to accomplish here? I think it's good to ask yourself that question, because I think that a lot of people get into this for like reasons that are like not super healthy. I think it can be kind of like a vent for a lot of rage that's not expressed elsewhere. And I think that Twitter, like, it doesn't it's not a good vent, because it really just encourages more of this. It just sort of magnifies anger, resentment, conflict. And I don't know. I often find that if I spend too long on online doing that kind of thing, like, I just start feeling bad about myself. I start feeling bad about the world. I start because I'm not doing anything helpful. I'm just sort of getting sucked into this like cycle of frustration and hatred.
And I don't even do it often, but the few times I've blown somebody up on the internet, I've regretted it. And it's not something that I do often. But one time I was working with a colleague who took credit for some work that I'd done. And the colleague not only took credit for it, but did it very publicly in talking to our funders and our friends and stuff. And so without thinking about it, I put this person on full-blown blast, because why would you steal my work? Why would you tell all the people that we have to work with that you did something that you didn't actually do? And actually, there's so many people that know you didn't do it. So why would you even expose yourself as a liar, was what I was saying. It turned out my tone was so heavy-handed that the way the public read my response to them was that I was the bully, that I was using my power, my privilege to bully, this very little tiny person who burst out into tears when she read my tweet. And of course, she found a whole community to hold her with her tears. And it didn't even help that it was another woman of color. I can't even say it was a white woman. It was another woman of color. It was. And so I've just learned that I don't ever want to put anything on the internet that I want to walk back. I want to be able to look at everything I say on the internet straight in the eye without shame.
I think I had an experience early on YouTube of kind of, so this is a little bit different, but I think early on it sort of didn't necessarily occur to me that if I talked about someone, they would see what I said. I think this is an experience that I think most public figures understand, that obviously anything they post will be seen. But I think to like, some of what we're talking about is like mob canceling, right? We're talking like mass shaming. I think a lot of the individual people participating that may genuinely sort of like not really think through that the person they're talking about will see it. Like, I can remember, I don't know, in 2016 or something, like saying like kind of mean things about someone in a video. And then when they left a comment on the video, being like immediately feeling this like sense of shame for what I'd done. I was like, oh God, like I didn't say that thinking that they would see it. I think a lot of people would tweet, like they can't imagine that someone who has, 100,000 followers or whatever would ever see their little tweet. But the truth is that I think people do. I think people are kind of narcissistic, and people read about themselves. So if you talk about someone, they're going to see it. And like, I don't know, sometimes it can help to, in YouTube, for example, I know that if I say something about another YouTuber, like there's consequences to that, because I'll probably run into them at, I don't know, at VidCon or the conference or whatever. Like, so that kind of limits me in terms of like, I won't say anything to someone that I won't say to their face. That doesn't mean that I won't criticize them, because some of these people, I will say to their face what I think. But I think that, the internet does make it easier. It makes it easier to trash talk people. I've had the experience of talking to someone who previously had just been just horrible to me online, and then somehow I find myself in a group like video call or something with them, and suddenly, and they're completely like respectful and like, oh, very, very quiet and very like, oh, like, you know what I mean? Like I don't know, it's easier to rage in the tweets than it is in the streets.
But I think it's also interesting to remind that for many people, internet is also the only way, the only platform. I mean, maybe if there is also this rage of calling out and like shouting that you're angry, then you're hurt. It's because there is nowhere else. Some people, especially women rights activists, anti-racist activists, can actually talk out. They don't own medias, they don't own publishing houses, they don't own TV channels. So I think that the difficulty is here. That how can we try and measure a place that is the only place where the expression can reach out to the world?
Yeah, I do try to keep that in mind that like some of these people on Twitter, like they just want to be heard, right? Like they don't have an opportunity to be heard most of the time. And they don't have what I have, which is this big like YouTube platform where I get to make my opinion heard. I get to tell my side of the story. Some people don't have that. And I do try to keep that in mind before I get too mad at someone who's raging at me on Twitter. It's like, well, this person doesn't have an opportunity to express what they've been through. And this is it for them. So like I don't know. That is something I do try to keep in mind. Yeah.
But we also need to recognize that we're at a sad place in humanity where people are trying to create these online communities for themselves, for sustenance, for support, for affirmation, and largely because they lack that in some way in their real lives outside of the internet. But the attention of the internet is fleeting. They're like a constant, millions of one night stands. It's like that is not real community, but people's need for community can be expressed that way. And so I find that a lot of people who abuse the call out culture are really looking for affirmation that should be addressed in other ways.
Yeah, I had that experience. I mean, I think this is part of the struggle I have. I think with a lot of the trans community online is that, well, so like the family rejection rate for trans people is like around 50%. So you have a population of people who like disproportionately is dealing with this trauma of rejection. They don't have a strong community. They don't have a support network, and they're hoping to get a sense of belonging online. And I mean, early in my transition, like I did this myself. Like I relied on trans people on the internet to make me feel like I had a place to express experiences that are very alien to most people. And I had this sense that these people were my friends or like a support network. And then a few months in, they turned against me because I guess I agreed to do a debate with someone who they thought, well, so with someone who was like kind of transphobic. And I guess they saw it as a betrayal, right? I was talking to someone who was bad. Like, right, I talked to one of the enemies, therefore I was untrustworthy. And they totally turned against me, and it hurt me so bad. And I was depressed for 2 weeks and didn't get out of bed because I had come to rely on this internet community to give me emotional support. Well, I learned not to do that again. So, yeah.
But it's very interesting you reaching this point, Natalie, because I wanted to ask you about the psychological impact of being canceled. So that's what you talked about in this video, and you say it in a very emotional and pudic at the same time way, but it's giving you a huge depression, right? To feel rejected by this community online you had built for yourself.
Yeah, I think that it's important. I mean, there's sort of different levels of severity that canceling can happen on, and sometimes when people complain about being canceled, they're just being giant babies who can't take criticism. But it's also important to keep in mind that sometimes this can be really, really nasty. Like for me, the worst part of it was basically everyone who I have is like a colleague or a collaborator or a friend was basically getting flooded with messages demanding that they publicly denounce me as an enemy, right? Like, and so that was this sense of just like paralyzing, like I can't do anything, I can't show my face, like I can't, anything I say in public will now be like further used to increase the basically harassment of not just me, but like of everyone I know. And that it was just like this incredibly isolating experience where, you feel hated, you feel like, the enemy of the people, right? Essentially, right? And you feel like, some people, especially people you don't know as well, some people did kind of distance themselves from me. So you feel like increasing isolation as like the social network around you like moves away from you and kind of turns against you. It's like an awful, awful feeling, especially when you're sort of short on other places to go, which I think people who are drawn to activism in the first place are disproportionately likely to be in that experience because, right, it's marginalized people who get involved in this kind of thing, and marginalized people kind of by definition don't have other places to go a lot of the time. So when like the movement turns against you, you're really, really alone.
Very often you hear people calling out others by saying they should progress, they should get better. And I see it as a vision of social justice as being a straight path towards the higher level of activism, which would be like, activist perfection, activist purity. Isn't the problem exactly there? Like aiming towards perfection is like, there is a mistake in this image. Loretta.
Yeah, because that assumes that political purity is both achievable and desirable, and it's neither. We do not necessarily want to have the absolute of we've got the right way or the wrong way and either my way or the highway. I mean, all human conversation is a forest of ambiguity. And you can actually have many different truths existing in the same space. That's what makes us human beings. And my truth doesn't have to be your truth, no matter then your glass lens in your eyeglasses has to be my glass lens in my eyeglasses. I mean, and so when you pursue political purity, you're working on the assumption that there's only one truth, and it's the one you're most fond of, and all of those other truths are bad, or that even trying to work on that one truth is a good thing. Like I said, that's when a lot of different people think a lot of different things and they move in the same direction, that's a movement. But when a lot of different people think one thing and they move in the same direction, that's a cult. And so I compare that political purity madness that we substitute for real organizing work as cult-like behaviors that are inappropriate for building a human rights movement. We're a movement of a lot of different people who entered it through different doors and in different ways with different priorities and different contexts and languages that we use to describe why we're in the movement. And the door I entered is not going to be your door. The language I use is not going to be your language. Even if we use the same word, we're going to attach different meanings to them. So it's such an absurd way to do organizing, to assume that you have to pursue political purity and perfection from very imperfect human beings.
Yeah, I wish it were easier to express that, like, it's just a reality that you're just not going to like everyone who's on your side, right? Like, there's a lot of different reasons why you might not get along, or you might just sort of not be compatible with some people or a certain group of people. Sometimes it's like you just come from such different backgrounds or just different perspectives that it's like a little bit hard to communicate. Or sometimes it's just like a clash of personalities. Like, people have different personalities, people have different ways of expressing themselves, and I have so often see this going on in like leftist spaces, that these like interpersonal drama essentially is kind of masquerading as political opposition. And it's like, if we could just like be honest about, like, look, we can all be in a movement together and also like not like each other and also not get along, and also someone slept with your boyfriend. Like, that's not a political struggle. That's a real problem. But it's like it's it's there's going to be conflict within a side, and I wish that we could express that, and instead of trying to pretend that every conflict is a political opposition.
Yeah, I sometimes want to say, you don't like my face, you don't like my voice, just say it. Don't use politics too.
Right, that's fine. Yeah.
But also, I think people mistake the purpose of a movement, of a political space. The purpose of a political space, in my opinion, is to end oppression, not to solve your personal problems. And so there's so many other ways to work on your stuff, but we're together from all of our diversities because we've defined ending a specific oppression is the problem. And so it's not meant to be a womb. It's not meant to be a safe space. It's not supposed to be a space that only reflects your opinions. That's not its purpose at all. But people are attracted to human rights work because their human rights are violated, and they mistakenly think that our work is about their specific violation instead of ending all violations.
I have one last question before I take a couple questions from the public. Do you ever get tired?
Of course. Every human gets tired. I mean, I think part of having endurance in this kind of work is knowing when to take a break. I mean, I know that there's this kind of like self-care discourse that's become like a bit of a parody of itself, bath salts or whatever. But like, I do think that like there needs to be like a self-care discourse of taking care of your body, taking care of your mind, not just because there's such a level of like personal unhealthiness in getting dragged into 8 hours of Twitter drama or whatever. Like this is not. It's not only is it a misuse of your time, it's also like bad for you. And I think that part of I've done a terrible job of this last month, but I actually have to very like deliberately limit how much time I spend, say, on Twitter or say reading, stuff that's just going to be very upsetting to me, or like a lot of my videos deal with like, I don't know, communities that are sort of built around bigotry online. I cannot spend too much time in those for research purposes because it starts sinking into me, and like I feel myself internalizing those judgments and so on. So yeah, I do get tired, and I'm not always the best at knowing when to quit.
Well, I've done anti-fascist work specifically since 1990, but I've also done work against, misogyny and racism for even longer, starting in 1970. And so I find that the best way to address, and I'm not talking about physical tired, because yes, I get physically tired. I had 2 hours sleep before I got up this morning and started a 5 Zoom day. So yes, there's that kind of tired. But the tired that I'm most afraid of is if my soul gets tired, if I start becoming cynical and not believing that the struggle is going to win, and if I get so impatient with the people who have their flaws like I have my flaws, who I have to work with, that I just want to walk away. And what works for me in terms of soul exhaustion is balance. And so there are times I just toggle my consciousness off, and I'll watch something totally ludicrous, like the Twilight film, for example, without doing an analysis of its gender dynamics or its racial dynamics. You have to have a toggle to turn your consciousness on and off, or you will burn out. Your soul will get exhausted by being demanded to be on all the time without any relief. And that balance is achieved by having totally apolitical or non-political friends. I remember being in Plaza Mayor in Spain when George Bush invaded Iraq on February 15th of that year. And I mean, it was a wonderful thing to be there and to watch that. But we're a country that's a perpetual war. So we're always making war on other people to take their resources. And at the same time, I'm opposing the war on Plaza Mayor. I've got a whole bunch of friends who are dear to me who are doing yellow ribbon parties for the soldiers, you know, and we don't necessarily talk about politics, but we do talk about our love for each other and how we're there and important in our lives in very significant ways. And I just want to pick up on something that Natalie said about estrangement from families, because I haven't talked about this on this show, but my estrangement from my family is because I'm trying to hold them accountable for multiple generations of childhood sexual abuse. And so I've got a portion of my family that speaks to me, and I've got another portion that wishes I never existed because I'm embarrassing them, bringing shame to the family. And then I write about it publicly and all these things. And so there's a lot of reasons people don't have the families they wish they had, but we have to deal with the families that we have. And that's one of the reasons I'm intentional about creating family that I know will be there at my funeral, even if we never talk politics.
Yeah, I found at moments, I don't know, when some horrible thing is going down on Twitter, for example, one of the most helpful things to me is honestly to go out for a drink with a friend who has no idea what any of this is and doesn't have a Twitter account. And then I try to explain what's happening. And something about that process of explaining, I realize how just convoluted, inconsequential madness the whole thing is. And it kind of makes me like, I just feel the tension sort of beginning to dissolve as I see their bored face looking back at me as I explain this totally trivial conflict.
So we only have 5 minutes left, but many questions actually, and it's always a weird question to ask to someone who is in the present, but the public always asks that. So how do you see the future of activism? Will there be a post-Twitter, post-Reddit, post-Instagram feminist struggle? Everybody, there are at least 3 questions about this future. How can we imagine the following? Are you inspired?
Well, yes, I mean, there's going to be a future, and the internet's going to change. Unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball. Like, I don't know what the next, because a lot of this is going to respond to like changes of technology, and I don't know what those are. But yeah, I don't know. I think that one thing I do see sort of happening now is people are becoming more aware of the way that that our current technology, our current social media, we're becoming more aware of how it works. And that awareness and that self-consciousness about it, I think, can be helpful when, you can sort of identify a pattern. Like you can say, oh, it's this thing happening again. And we sort of know how that goes. And then it's not quite as like, I don't know, if so you're being canceled on Twitter. Okay, well, so I feel like now I sort of know what that is, what that's like, what that means. And so it's not as like raw and upsetting as it was maybe the first time it happened, because I sort of understand that it's not the end of the world. Like it feels like it is, but it's not. And, I sort of know how to handle that badly and how to handle it well. And I think that as more and more people sort of, come to like a deeper understanding of how this works, I think that things will sort of change for the better. At least I hope so.
Loretta, what does your crystal ball say?
Well, my crystal ball says it's really a Sankofa moment. That's an old African saying that you look to the past to bring from the past what you need in the present. And for me, all human destiny is tied to the relationships that we have. And as technology has changed from the telegraph machine to the telephone to television to the internet, I mean, it's all still about the predictability of human relations and how predictable we are as humans. We just have better and faster toys to play with. And yes, the toys do change us too, but not as much as we like to think, because we've got those same old emotions, those same old flaws. It's just we have the speed now to spread our flaws more widely, maybe. And so the future's going to hold the same old messed up humans the present has. And we're just going to have bigger and better and more expensive and maybe smaller toys to play with. Because I remember the first computers were this big and now they're this big. So I'm not that worried about the future, because I take a lot of comfort in the fact that when I look at the past, it was the same old human beings. And so when I look at the future, it's going to be the same old human being. Now, what I hope changes is that we understand and really understand what COVID has done to us. And that is lifting up the whole concept of human interdependence. We need each other. One person's behavior simply does affect us. It's not that individual liberty. I don't need a mask because I don't have to care about someone else. I hope we put that whole alienated individualism to rest, because right-thinking people understand that we are actually dependent on each other and interdependent. And whether I know you or not, whether you're healthy is going to affect whether I'm healthy. Whether you're starving is going to affect whether I have food. I mean, this is an ancient African concept of Ubuntu, but in its present form, it's being expressed through COVID, particularly the terrible effect it's having on the United States, where, of course, we've got the worst outbreaks, the most deaths, the most stupidest president. I mean, we've got a lot of things congealing, congregating to create a perfect storm, worse than any other country in the world. But if there is a silver lining, it's because people are saying, yeah, it's not just about me. It's not just about my family. It's not just about my identity. It's about, I have to be aware and concerned about all these other people, because my money or no gun or no wall can actually keep a virus out.
Thank you so much for this conclusion, Loretta. Thank you to both of you. Thank you, Natalie. It was such a pleasure to be talking to you. That's a good thing about using Zoom. It's a good silver lining too. I've been able to interview you both, even if you're very far away.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was lovely speaking to both of you.
All right, and I really enjoyed this. Good luck.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you to Loretta Ross and Natalie Wynn for being my guests today in La Poudre. And thank you to Les Créatives Festival for making this happen. It was incredible. Nouvelles Écoutes is the executive producer of La Poudre, a podcast produced by Aurore Meyer-Mailleux, prepared and recorded by Gaia Marty, and mixed by Marion Emery.